Start. MTC. Q-9 number 1. Joanna tried not to listen to her inner voices and marched on. Jonah. Though she was going as fast as she could feel the cold threatening her. How long have I been walking? 20 minutes? More? 20? She didn't dare to check the time, knowing it would cool off her body even more if she took off her glove. Walk on. Don't think. Walk. Joanna forced herself to continue for what seemed an eternity. Jonah. Don't look for the light. Just go on. Her throat became very dry, and her body started to tremble from exhaustion. When she couldn't resist any more, she lifted her head once again and scanned the horizon. Nothing. The light is gone. I'm all alone. I will die out here. At that moment, her foot hit nothing, and she tumbled headlong into the snow. She tried to protect her face by landing on her arms, but the impact sent a sharp pain through her injured shoulder, which made her cry out. Tears sprung from her eyes and froze on her cheeks. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. QQ-8 number 2. Communication is not merely a matter of producing effects on other communicators, it is one of actually engaging with them. Communicating is a kind of sharing. When two people communicate, rather than talk at each other, they come to have something in common. They must start with something in common, too, even if this is only the language they share. Communication does not demand complete agreement or acceptance, but it does demand understanding. When put into language, my thoughts, ideas, notions, and beliefs are no longer mine alone, assuming they ever were. They have been put into a form in which they can be shared. The primary aim of language use is understanding, all of the other effects my linguistic actions may have on other people, getting my listeners to agree with me, to obey my orders, to trust me, or whatever, only come about because what I have tried to communicate has been understood. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Q-9 number 3. As the matriarch of one of America's first families, Abigail Adams strongly influenced two presidents, her husband, John Adams, and her son John Quincy Adams. Abigail Adams, John Quincy Adams. She is also recognized as one of the country's greatest and most productive letter writers. Abigail was born on November 11, 1744, in Weymouth, Massachusetts. Abigail 17441111 Weymouth. One of three daughters of a Congregational minister, William Smith, and his wife, Elizabeth, Abigail was a sickly child and was unable to attend school. William Smith Elizabeth Abigail. Small, quiet, and reserved, with piercing dark eyes, she was also strong-willed and had a quick and curious mind. In spite of her lack of formal schooling, Abigail was a voracious reader who took advantage of her father's well-stocked library to study literature, history, and philosophy. Abigail. She taught herself French and was tutored by her maternal grandmother, whom she adored and who favored a happy method of mixing instruction and amusement together. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Q-9 number 4. For non-scientific audiences or short pieces where a term would be used only once, avoid jargon altogether. There is little benefit to introducing new vocabulary or notation if you will not be using it again. And for non-statisticians, equations full of Greek symbols, subscripts, and superscripts are more likely to reawaken math anxiety than to promote effective communication. The same logic applies to introductory or concluding sections of scientific papers. Using a new word means that you must define it, which takes attention away from your main point. If you will not be using that term again, find other ways to describe numeric facts or patterns. Replace complex or unfamiliar words, acronyms, or mathematical symbols with their everyday equivalents, and rephrase complicated concepts into more intuitive ones. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Q-9 number 5. TV can influence creative thought. This is a concern in the US because children watch an average of 30 hours each week. 30. Certain TV programs are designed specifically for children and intended to be educational. But even these are probably bad influences. This is because all TV shows require a passive viewer. The children watching TV do not need to think for themselves. TV shows can ask questions and pause, allowing a viewer to think, and this might be marginally effective, but TV programs tend to be fast-paced, free of gaps, and supply detailed pictures, sound and everything an individual needs. There is no room for inference, for problem-solving, for originality. Programmers do not want gaps or opportunities for their viewers to think for themselves, they might turn the channel. In this light, all TV is very likely to stifle development because of the medium, not the content. You can have a good TV show, but it is still TV and thus still leads to intellectual passivity. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Q-9 number 6. Many pleasures are not a response to need or deprivation. I can be perfectly comfortable, yet pleased by the warmth of the sun as it breaks the clouds and comes streaming through the bay window. A light snack does away with hunger pangs, yet I am still seduced by the smell of garlic gently sizzling in olive oil. These pleasures are the bonus of life because they transcend need. We experience them as pleasures even though we aren't suffering from their deprivation. Thus, the enjoyment of food when chosen, rather than forced, turns eating into something more than acquiring nutrition. Pleasure rather than the satisfaction of needs is the point of the experience. Such freely chosen enjoyment presupposes an excess of time, attention, and usually some resources. It is a dimension of life that is not bound up with necessities, despite being part of everyday existence. It is a surplus, a form of grace, and thus has meaning that is not reducible to a function and serves no purpose other than the enjoyment. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Q-9 number 7. One advantage of using temperature anomalies is that you can measure changes in a quantity even if you cannot measure the absolute value of the quantity. Imagine, for example, that you want to determine if a child is growing. The most obvious way to do this is to measure the child's height every few months. But, if you could not do that, an alternative would be to measure his height relative to, say, a mark on the wall. If the top of his head is 1 inch below the mark 1 year, even with it the next year, and 1 inch above the following year, then you can be confident that the child is growing 1 inch per year, even if you never know the child's absolute height. 1, 1, 1. This is the situation for the Earth's temperature. We cannot measure the Earth's absolute temperature with high accuracy, because measuring it would require an extremely dense network of temperature measurements, but we can measure the temperature anomaly with high accuracy, high enough to see clear warming. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Q-9 number 8. Focus groups are commonly used in marketing, but in some countries there are very real problems with them. Since it is difficult to recruit random people to be in focus groups, research agencies have developed large pools of consumers willing to take part in focus groups at short notice. However, the problem is that many of these consumers are too willing. Research has revealed that many consumers enjoy the pay, free food, and experience of being an expert and focus on pleasing the moderator in order to get invited back regularly. Unfortunately, the way to please the very human moderator seems to be to work out what they want to hear, rather than providing them with genuine insights about the brand. This makes much of the data gained from focus group panels worthless. Agencies are aware of this problem and ensure a churn rate within groups to keep them fresh, but consumers get around this by using multiple names in order to remain in the pool. Focus groups formed from consumer pools often fail to provide reliable feedback because the participants' primary goal is to be selected to enjoy the benefits of participation. MTC. Good job.